welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Martin, and the channel's sort of my attempt at sharing some of my experiences now that I've retired. You join me today. I'm about, probably about halfway between where I last saw you and my journey back to Northampton to get back on the canals. It's been fairly eventful. I'm now in Peterborough. Initially, when I left the Old West, I went back to Wicken Fen to say cheerio to everybody. That was great, caught up with a few friends again. But also, I discovered a new installation that they've got on the nature reserve. And it's all about sound. There are various installations around the site, but what they're doing is they're listening to underwater sounds, underground sounds, and trees, to sounds from inside trees, which is something I've never ever heard before. So it's well worth a look. I'll put a link in, but you are looking for www.voicesofthefen.co.uk. You can also visit the Wicken Fen website, which is www.nationaltrust.org.uk/Wicken Fen. I had to read those out because I wanted to get them right. I will put a link to both of those in the description down below, but it's well worth a listen. As I say, there's a live underwater sound, a live underwater microphone, hydrophone, and then there's microphones at various points around the nature reserve recording things that we wouldn't have heard before. Just backtracking a little bit, just before I left the Old West, I encountered something quite, well, you could only say bizarre, which was sounds from one of the most mountainous parts of Europe in one of the most flattest parts of Europe. There was a small herd of cows, and one of them was rocking a cowbell. There are a reasonable number of great crested grebes. Now, great crested grebes have gone through something of a resurgence in the last 30 to 40 years after being very close to extinction. And the reason for that drop in population then is because their feathers were much prized by the Victorians for hand mufflers. Thankfully, that practice no longer exists. Now, with great crested grebes, in order to increase the success rate of the youngsters, the adults will often split up, taking part of the brood each to a different part of the river. This helps to reduce the competition between the youngsters for food and helps to increase success. So on rivers particularly, you'll often see an adult and one, maybe two youngsters, and that grouping will stay together until the youngsters reach maturity and leave. just before we finish with the wildlife, I want to show you something that I've never ever seen before, and that was a group of, I don't know, between 50 and 60 swallows and house martins actually bathing on the wing. Now, I've seen them drink before on the wing, where they hold their wings up in a V and then skim low over the water, dip their bills in the water and just scoop up a little bit, but I've never actually seen them fully plunge into the water and then fly away, which is exactly what they were doing on this morning. And I know they were bathing because as they flew over me and gave the plumage a shake, the water that they shook off was dripping all over me. Now, when I left Wycombe, the plan was to go to Ely early in the morning, get there, moor up, go and pick up a prescription from the pharmacy, which had been sent through by my GP. That was a 3-month prescription, so I don't have to fear of running short of whatever it is I need. I wanted to go shopping. I wanted to get a full shop to get me to here, to Peterborough, and I needed to go to the laundry. To the laundrette, I should say, to, well, you know what for. So the shopping and the laundry, no problems at all. The pharmacy was a bit of a different matter. When I got there, although they told me that they got my prescription and it just needed collecting, when I got there they'd only let me have a prescription for 1 month, despite my GP and pharmacy at home sending through a prescription for 3 months. Anyway, to cut a long story short, a couple of days and lots of toing and froing and phone calls, finally got it sorted, and so I left Ely 2 days later, which was quite frustrating. Apologies for the banging, it was a bit windy today and that's one of the doors banging against its stops. I've wedged something against it now, so hopefully that'll be okay. I left Ely and made it straight through, almost straight through to Denver Sluice, so that caught up a little bit of time. Got to Denver Sluice, got moored up, got booked in for the passage across or along the tidal Great Ouse, and then realised it was actually, as it is today, quite windy. Now the windows are rattling. Good grief. Anyway, close the windows now. Where was I? Yeah, got to Denver Sluice and got booked in. Checked the weather forecast because it was getting quite windy and I wasn't so much apprehensive. The journey up the tidal Great Ouse had been completely uneventful and, you know, you think, what's the problem? But I knew that going back I was going to be going with the tide and there was quite a strong wind, and when it came to turning at the far end to get back into Salters Lode Lock, I'd have to cut across the current and the wind, and it's a fairly tight turn and I didn't want to be smashing into the bank on the other side. So I checked the weather. It's quite windy on that day. Checked the next 2 days and the wind was increasing, so whereas I'd booked passage for 2 days hence on the Friday, I went back and said, look, I want to come through tomorrow. This was the Thursday, where the wind isn't quite so strong, and so they got that changed. That was all okay. And as you can see, the journey, it's quick. It seemed a lot quicker going back than it did when I went up. I don't know why. Maybe because I was going with the wind and with the current. When I got to the turning point, got all my markers sorted out, and then began to turn and found myself drifting towards the bank. So I gave it some revs. Got into the lock, job done. So once I'd gone through Salter's Lock, made my way towards Outwell. I was going to spend the night at Outwell Wharf. Unfortunately, Outwell Wharf was full, so I spent the night just around the corner in Outwell. Visited a local pub, had a couple of beers, got myself some fish and chips, which was nice, and then on the following morning set off nice and early. The intention was to get into March to Fox's Marina, fill it with diesel, and then carry on to Whittlesea. So that all went well. Got into March, lots of weed on the way back, but got into March. Got into Fox's Marina, filled it with diesel, set off. Halfway to Whittlesea, the engine note changed, and because the engine normally runs so smooth and steady, you notice it when the note changes. And because there was a lot of weed, I thought, I must have picked up some weed on the propeller. So I slowed down, put it in reverse to clear the propeller, set off again. It seemed to be okay. Then a couple of miles out of Whittlesea, it did it again. This time the engine stopped, so I drifted for, 10 minutes while I got the engine going again and put it in reverse to clear what I thought was a weed blockage, and then set off again. It seemed fine. Moored up about a mile out of Whittlesea. I found a rural mooring managed by the middle level commissioners. It's a fairly basic mooring, but and it's not marked on any of the guides, but I thought, well, this is an ideal place to stop. I can check the weed hatch, make sure it's clear so that I can carry on in the morning and get to Whittlesea and beyond. Well, at that stage I was going to continue all the way to Stanground Lock. So set off in the morning. I got through Ashline Lock in Whittlesea and decided time for a cup of coffee, so pulled over on a mooring there, made a cup of coffee, set off, got round the very, very tight Brigate bend in Whittlesea, which is, you need to do a 3-point turn to get round it. It's that sharp. I've only got a 45-foot boat. I dread to think what anybody with a longer boat has to do to get through there, because it was tight for me. Anyway, got through Brigate, and then the engine started to play up again. There was a lot of weed, and again I thought I'd got a weed issue, but each time I went down the weed hatch was clear. and so I thought there's more to it than this. As I got closer to stand ground, the challenge, the problem became greater, and the last, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile or a mile it was at a crawl, at a snail's pace, and it kept cutting out, and I could start it and it would keep cutting out. Anyway, I got to the lock landing at stand ground and drifted in and was waved into the lock, but I went to see the lady and I said, look, I can't go any further. There's something wrong with the engine. So they were brilliant. They said, well, look, you stay where you are, call River Canal Rescue, and there's no problem, you can stay there. So I phoned River and Canal Rescue. They sent somebody out late that evening, about 6 o'clock. The engineer turned up, did all the usual things, tried to bleed the system, blah blah blah, and then said, your lift pump isn't working. And I said, is that the one down the side of the engine with the filter in it? She said, yes. I said, well, that's never worked, and the engines run very smoothly. She said, well, without it, you can't pressurise your fuel system, so I don't know how you've been running. By now it was 7:30 and getting late, and I thought, well, I don't want to hold this person up any longer. So I said, well, what do we do now? She said, well, I'll report it, we'll get a pump ordered, because I haven't got one, and then somebody will be out to fit it for you. And I thought, well, that's the best option. I'm okay here. She really wants to get home. She's got to drive back to Derby from Peterborough. That's quite a distance. So she did all the necessary. I said, if you can give it a sort of urgency label, because I've got to get to Peterborough and I want to catch the train home for various reasons. She said, yes, of course. So I got a call from the River Canal Rescue to say that my membership didn't cover me for this kind of breakdown, which I thought was a bit strange, seeing as I've used them before and it was a parts failure, so why not? Anyway, they'd got into a muddle and not looked at my profile properly and misread what my membership actually was. When they eventually got it right, phoned back full of apologies, said, yes, we're going to order the part, we'll get it delivered as close to you as we can so that engineer can come out, fit it within a day or so. So I thought, well, that's great. I checked in with the people at the lock to say, is it okay for me to hang on that long, because I don't really want to block the system. They were brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Anyway, it got delayed further. It happened on the Saturday. The parts were ordered on Sunday. I was assured they would arrive by Wednesday. When they hadn't arrived by lunchtime, I phoned up and they said, well, I'll book it in. It hasn't arrived yet, but I'll book it in for tomorrow afternoon. Book the engineer in for tomorrow afternoon, which is Thursday. Anyway, within an hour, the engineer had turned up. He'd got another pump, so he turned up, fitted the pump. A guy called Steve fitted the pump. Engine started, system pressurised, and so this morning, Thursday, Tina let me through the lock, or helped me through passage the lock, and I made my way down to Peterborough. The boat's running wonderfully, fingers crossed. I don't know how it was running prior to this, because it had no lift pump, so how the system was getting pressurised I have no idea, but it did run and it ran well. Anyway, that's all sorted. So now I'm continuing with my sort of facts, or researching my facts vlogs. It's not quite as straightforward as I thought it might be. Like everything else, the more you learn, the more questions you need to ask, and so I'm trying to treat it much as an essay when I was back at school and at college. But that was a long time ago, and I can't remember how to structure an essay very well now, so it's all a bit hit and miss, and I'm trying not to get too deeply into the facts and figures, because A, that won't make a very interesting thing to put on YouTube, and B, it just uses up so much time, effort, and eventually the video will be so long that it won't even be worth doing, so, or it'll defeat the point of keeping it within sort of 30 to 35 minutes. So that's where I am now. I've not quite got that first one ready yet. It's all been a bit fraught and hectic, and that downtime when would be ideal, I'm taking the opportunity more to relax from the stresses of pharmacies and the stresses of engines. Plus, when I was held up at stand ground for a few days, because I couldn't start the engine up to replenish the batteries, I didn't want to plug in the laptop because that would have drained my EcoFlow, which is my backup power source. So, and I couldn't recharge it on the batteries. I had plenty of solar, but I'm a little bit, I like to have that backup, that reassurance. So I didn't do any when I was there, which would have been quite ideal, but I didn't do any while I was there. So that's where we are now. Just a bit of an update, just a short one. I hope you've found it sort of interesting, or possibly not. If you've got any friends or people you don't like, send them a link. But that's the update. I'm now in Peterborough. The next step is I'm going to catch the train home to, well, it's only a short hop really. Catch the train home, get the car MOT'd, which is one of the reasons I'm going home. Part of the family are on holiday in Italy, so I can't go and visit them, but my folks, I shall go and see them. They've got some jobs they want me to do, which is great. And I think my daughter will be back off holiday before I need to come back to move the boat on, so hopefully I get to see those guys as well. So if you're not already, please subscribe. It'll help me keep these vlogs going if they're of all of interest. As I say, if you want to know what happens on the next part of the journey between Peterborough and Northampton, or at least an update of what happens, then click the notification button. And if it's been of any help, then give us a thumbs up. Okay, take it easy.